Theresa May will have PMQs today where we'll see her spar again with Jeremy Corbyn, but then she'll leave a frozen Downing Street to go to Brussels. She'll be hoping for a warm reception when she meets Jean-Claude Juncker. Of course, they agreed the withdrawal agreement last week, including the money as well, that 39 billion, but they need to agree the political text on the future relationship. The EU had set a deadline for doing that yesterday. It's still not agreed, though. There are some sort of arguments being made by Spain about future talks on Gibraltar, and the French are unhappy as well about the fishing arrangements in the Channel. So they need to try and work through that declaration to get it sorted ahead of the weekend meeting of the EU 27 leaders. And I think this is now a bit of a game of optics with Theresa May going to Brussels. The strategy from Number 10 has been to look like the Prime Minister is constantly working. She went out on the weekend and did lots of interviews. She did a phone-in on LBC on Friday. She's been out and about sort of selling this deal at the CBI conference, and she'll be going to Brussels to make it look like she's really working. And it seems to be sort of resonating with British people. There's a new poll out. 33% of voters were backing Theresa May to stay in her post last week. Now that's up to 46%. So she seems to be getting some popularity from what she's been doing.
Well, let's focus on that domestic front side of things. We're seeing those first signs of this opposition coalition building up to create potentially an alternative solution. What more can you tell us about that?
That's right. Nicola Sturgeon, the SNP leader, came down from Edinburgh yesterday, and she was having meetings with a backbencher, Nick Bowles, on the Conservative side, who's pushing for the UK to adopt a Norway model if they can't get the Brexit deal through the House of Commons, which is looking increasingly likely. And Nicola Sturgeon also met with Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader, to try to build up a bit of a coalition of opposition parties. Now, they did have some disagreements about freedom of movement to come in and state aid rules, but it seems like the SNP are trying to move towards this softer Brexit position, but they still also support the idea of a second referendum if that won't work. But Theresa May is on a slightly more assured footing now, at least with her own party. Yesterday, as you saw, mocked on one of the front pages, Jacob Rees-Mogg and the Brexiteers in the European Research Group gave a press conference which was a bit of a dad's army, a comedy show from the 70s here of some sort of hapless gents on the home guard. And Jacob Rees-Mogg said the coup had been unsuccessful, but that it might work in a time. He's sort of hoping that they can get all those 48 letters in, but at the moment they don't seem to be flooding the 1922 committee chairman Graham Brady. So Theresa May still in Number 10 and still working to get this all sorted.
What are those aboard feeling right now on the Aquarius?
Good morning, Belle. As you can see, the weather is not helping today. As we know, Italian prosecutors have ordered a seizure of a rescue ship, Aquarius, that is chartered by SOS Méditerranée and Doctors Without Borders. An investigation that concerns 24 tons of waste that has been accumulated in 11 different cities. We're talking about waste mismanagement. These are the accusations for Doctors Without Borders. Yesterday, I spoke to one representative of SOS Méditerranée, the head of operation. He told me that technically the ship is not seized, meaning that they're going on business as usual. They're waiting for more details on this order, and it's possible as well that this order might come into effect once the vessel arrives in Italy. Now, as we know, Aquarius has been going on through some troubles. Just to remind ourselves, last June it was in a political standoff when Interior Minister Matteo Salvini denied access to Italian ports for Aquarius. And more recently, the boat was stripped of its flag, both by Gibraltar and Panama, in what has been described as a politically motivated decision. As we know, most NGOs now have been preventing from continuing their rescue and search operations at sea as a result of the hardline policies that have been put forward by Italian Interior Minister Salvini. Last week I was in Palermo. I got the chance to speak to the city's mayor, Leoluca Orlando. He has a different view from Interior Minister Salvini on the culture of welcome, and this is what he had to say.
Palermo, a city that for centuries has been one of the capitals of the Mediterranean. In this Jerusalem of Europe, many cultures and nations have left a visible mark. Greeks, Romans, Normans and Spanish, they all lived here. Most of the 600,000 migrants who have arrived in Italy since 2014 landed here in Sicily. The city's mayor, Leoluca Orlando, knows it well. After he was re-elected for the 5th time in 2016, he turned the once known as the capital of the mafia into the Italian capital of culture. I met the Sicilian mayor in his residence. He told me how fighting the mafia helped him shape a modern culture of welcome. Last June, he was one of the few Italian politicians who defied Interior Minister Salvini's hardline policies. He said his city was ready to allow rescue ship Aquarius to dock and disembark in Palermo's port.
Quando qualcuno mi chiede quanti migranti ci sono a Palermo, 30.000, 40.000.
When someone asks me how many migrants live in Palermo, 30,000, 40,000, 80,000, 100,000, I reply nobody. Whoever lives in Palermo is a Palermite. I make no difference between those born in the city and those living in Palermo. Do you call this a model? Well, I call it a concrete experience made by a philosopher who loves philosophy, but who also works as a mayor. My goal is to free the city from the shame of the past, and that is the mafia that used to kill people. Minister Salvini's approach looks like the beginning of fascism. He plays volleyball, I play cricket. It's two different practices, two different rules, two different sets of values.
Pratiche diverse, due regole diverse, due mondi di valori diversi.
Ballaro's open-air market is 100 years old. In the heart of the city, it's a mosaic of cultures, a mix of Bangladeshi, African and Sicilian groceries. Today, in what used to be the most run-down area in the city, young entrepreneurs have come to invest. Volti Volti was created in 2014. It's both a co-working space and a restaurant with a team of 27 from 10 different countries. Ibra is a regular customer here. He arrived in Sicily 10 years ago when he left the Ivory Coast to reach Europe. Today he's the president of the Council of Cultures that represents all the different communities living in Palermo.
In Palermo, an immigrant doesn't feel different from an Italian who was born here. An immigrant here is directly involved in the social, economic and political activities.
Ibra told me after spending all these years building a better future for himself and the city, he doesn't want to live again.
And I can't think that the Kremlin is celebrating Kim's appointment this morning.
Well, no celebration, of course. It's quite an unpleasant surprise, and some Russian politicians do know who is the one behind this surprise. The US and its allies could have influenced this vote in Dubai. That's what I've just been told by the head of the International Committee of the Russian State Duma, Leonid Slutsky. So he is persuaded that this vote was influenced by the US, and he says that of course Russia respects the new president from the South Korea, but Mr. Prokopchuk could have brought a very wide experience, his personal and the one from Russia, in fight against various international threats, said Slutsky. And of course there is a disappointment. The Kremlin was watching this vote in Dubai very closely. Yesterday, Dmitry Peskov, its spokesperson, said that the US tries to meddle into this election, and of course Kremlin could see the result as a defeat. And I am absolutely sure that many political analysts today will be saying that Russia lost this round in information war against the West and Bill Browder. But it's good news for all those Kremlin critics like Alexei Navalny. They were very concerned that with Mr. Prokopchuk as the president of Interpol, Moscow will get much more tools in order to fight with the Kremlin critics all over the world.